Ibrahim Traoré visits a hospital and discovers that the cleaning woman is his adoptive mother. The early morning sun cast long shadows across Ouagadougou as President Ibrahim Traoré's motorcade wound through the capital's streets. The dry Harmattan wind carried dust from the Sahel, coating the city in a fine orange haze. Despite having been in power for nearly 3 years, the 36-year-old president still found these official visits somewhat uncomfortable. A military man thrust into politics by necessity rather than ambition. Today's schedule included a visit to the newly renovated wing of Delgado Ouedraogo University Hospital. His aide, Moussa Sanou, sat beside him reviewing briefing notes as the convoy navigated past street vendors and morning commuters. The hospital renovation was completed last month, Moussa explained, funded primarily by the development agreement with China. The medical staff has increased by 30%, but they're still struggling with equipment shortages. Ibrahim nodded, his mind elsewhere. 3 years into his presidency, the burden of leading a nation facing insurgency, poverty, and climate challenges weighed heavily. Born in Bondokui to humble beginnings, he often reflected on the journey that had brought him here, from military academy to the presidential palace. "We should focus on the pediatric ward," Ibrahim said. "The childhood mortality rates in the eastern regions are still too high." The motorcade pulled into the hospital compound, where a small delegation of health officials waited. Dr. Cabaret, the hospital director, stepped forward with an extended hand. "Your Excellency, we are honored by your visit. The staff has been preparing all week." Ibrahim smiled, shaking hands with each official. "The honor is mine. These healthcare workers are the real heroes of our nation." The entourage moved through corridors painted in fresh white and blue. Patients and staff lined the hallways, some taking photos with their phones. Ibrahim made a point to stop frequently, speaking with nurses and doctors about their daily challenges. In the pediatric ward, he sat beside children receiving treatment, asking their parents about their experiences. A small boy with malaria gripped his finger tightly, unwilling to let go, which brought a rare, genuine smile to the president's face. After touring the new surgical facilities, Ibrahim decided to deviate from the planned route. "I'd like to see the regular wards, not just the renovated sections," he told Dr. Cabaret. "Show me where the greatest needs remain." His security detail exchanged concerned glances, but adjusted accordingly as the group redirected toward the older wing. The contrast was immediate: peeling paint, older equipment, and more crowded conditions. Yet the dedication of the staff remained evident. As they walked through the general medicine department, Ibrahim noticed an elderly woman in a gray uniform mopping the floor in a patient room. Something about her movements, the careful way she worked around the patient's bed, triggered a distant memory. He paused, watching her methodical work. The woman, focused on her task, hadn't noticed the presidential delegation. She hummed softly, a familiar tune that Ibrahim hadn't heard in decades, a lullaby from his childhood in Bondokui. His heart began racing as recognition dawned. The curve of her shoulders, the way she tilted her head while working. It couldn't be, and yet, "Madame," he called softly. The woman turned, her eyes widening at the sight of the president and his entourage. She quickly lowered her gaze and bowed respectfully. "Your Excellency," she murmured, clutching her mop handle tightly. But when she looked up again, their eyes met, and time seemed to stand still in the hospital corridor. Ibrahim stared at the weathered face that had featured in his earliest memories, the face of Mariam Ouedraogo, the woman who had taken him in when he was just 6 years old after his biological mother had fallen ill. "Mama Mariam?" he whispered, his official title and position momentarily forgotten. The mop clattered to the floor as recognition flooded her features. "Ibrahim? My Ibrahim?" The security team tensed, uncertain how to respond to this unexpected interaction, but Ibrahim waved them back. The hospital director and officials watched in confusion as the president of Burkina Faso took 3 long strides toward the cleaning woman and embraced her tightly. "I've been looking for you for years," he said, his voice thick with emotion. After the village relocated during the drought, Mariam's eyes filled with tears as she touched his face with weathered hands. "My son, a president. Allah is great indeed." Around them, hospital staff and patients watched in stunned silence as the most powerful man in the country reunited with the woman who had once been his world, now a simple hospital cleaning woman. The presidential security detail quickly cleared a small meeting room near the hospital administration offices. Ibrahim insisted that Mariam join him there, despite the confused whispers of hospital administrators and the concerned glances of his aides. For the first time since taking office, protocol felt meaningless compared to the thundering of his heart. Mariam sat awkwardly in a leather chair, her worn cleaning uniform stark against the polished furniture. Her hands, cracked from years of labor with harsh cleaning chemicals, rested in her lap. Ibrahim dismissed everyone except Musa, his most trusted aide. "Bring tea," he instructed, before turning his complete attention to the woman who had shaped his early years. "Mama Mariam," Ibrahim began, struggling to find the right words. "I searched for you after I graduated from the military academy. I went back to Bondo Kui, but the drought had forced many to relocate. No one knew where you had gone." Mariam nodded slowly, her eyes taking in the man before her, so different from the skinny boy she had raised. "When the drought came, we moved to Bobo Dioulasso. Your adoptive father, may Allah rest his soul, became ill soon after. The medical bills..." She gestured to her uniform. "I have been cleaning at hospitals ever since." Ibrahim leaned forward. "Why didn't you try to contact me after I joined the military, or after the change in government?" Mariam's laugh was soft and tinged with the wisdom of her years. "What would I say? Hello, I am the woman who raised Ibrahim Traoré when his mother fell ill. You had your own path to follow. A cleaning woman should not disturb a military officer or a president." The tea arrived and Musa quietly served them before retreating to a corner of the room. Ibrahim watched as Mariam blew gently on the hot liquid, exactly as she had done thousands of times in their small home in Bondo Kui. "Tell me about the years I missed," Ibrahim said, and so she did. She spoke of the struggle after the drought, how she had taken in 3 more orphaned children over the years, raising them alongside her biological daughter, Aisha. She had worked double shifts cleaning hospitals and offices to put them through school. 2 had become teachers, 1 a nurse, and Aisha now worked for a mobile phone company in Ouagadougou. "And you never remarried?" Ibrahim asked. Mariam shook her head. "There was no time, and no man who understood my commitment to the children." As she spoke, Ibrahim's mind filled with memories of his years with her. How she had taken him in after his biological mother's illness had made it impossible for her to care for him, though not formally adopted through government channels, in the traditional way of their community. Mariam had become his mother in every sense that mattered. He remembered her teaching him to read by lamplight, saving to buy his school supplies, walking miles to attend his school performances. When food was scarce, she had always ensured the children ate first. Her hands had soothed his fevers and bandaged his scraped knees. "Do you remember when I fell from the mango tree?" Ibrahim asked suddenly. Mariam's face lit up with the memory. "You were so stubborn. I told you the branches were too thin at the top, but you insisted on climbing higher than the other boys. When you fell, I thought my heart would stop." She shook her head, smiling. "You broke your arm but still tried to claim you were fine. You wrapped it with strips of cloth and tree bark as a splint," Ibrahim continued, "and told me that a brave boy knows when to accept help. And now that brave boy leads the nation," Mariam said softly. "Your mother would have been proud." A comfortable silence fell between them, filled with unspoken memories and shared history. "Why do you still work, Mama? At your age, you should be resting." Mariam straightened in her chair. "Work gives dignity, and my salary helps my grandchildren attend school. What would I do sitting at home all day?" Ibrahim studied the woman before him, strong despite her age, proud despite her circumstances. He thought of the presidential palace where he now lived, its spacious rooms so different from the small home they had shared. He thought of the decisions he made daily, affecting millions of lives, and how often he had drawn upon the lessons of resilience and integrity she had taught him. "Mama Mariam," he said finally, "I want to help you. Not because you need charity, but because I owe you a debt I can never repay." Her eyes grew stern. "I did not raise you to believe in debts between family. What I gave was freely given." "Then accept freely what I wish to give now," Ibrahim countered, "not as the president, but as the boy you raised." Outside the meeting room, hospital staff whispered among themselves, trying to understand the extraordinary scene they had witnessed. The president's security team maintained their vigilance while exchanging puzzled glances. Inside, Ibrahim Traoré, military leader and president, was simply a son reunited with the mother who had shaped his character and set him on his path, her simple wisdom having guided him through his most difficult decisions, even when she was absent from his life. News of the president's unexpected encounter spread through the hospital like wildfire. By mid-afternoon, journalists had gathered outside the main entrance, their cameras trained on the building as rumors circulated about Ibrahim Traoré's emotional reunion with a hospital cleaning woman. Inside the administration wing, Ibrahim's chief of staff, Bamouni, had arrived, his face etched with concern about the security breach and public relations implications. He paced outside the meeting room while Ibrahim and Mariam continued their conversation, oblivious to the commotion their reunion had caused. "You should return to the palace, Mr. President," Bamouni insisted when finally admitted to the room. "We can arrange a private meeting at a more appropriate time and place." Ibrahim regarded his chief of staff coolly. "Mama Mariam will be joining me for dinner at the palace tonight. Please make the necessary arrangements." Bamouni's expression flickered between surprise and disapproval, but he nodded. "As you wish, Your Excellency." When Ibrahim explained the invitation to Mariam, she shook her head vigorously. No, that is not a place for someone like me. I have my small apartment. I have my work." "Just dinner," Ibrahim insisted gently. "We have 20 years to catch up on." Eventually, Mariam agreed, but only after Ibrahim promised that she could return to her apartment afterward. "And I must inform my supervisor that I am leaving early today," she added, ever conscientious. Ibrahim chuckled, imagining the hospital administrator's face when told that the president had granted personal leave to a cleaning woman. Nevertheless, he arranged for Mariam to properly notify her superiors. As they prepared to leave, Mariam hesitated. "I cannot go to the presidential palace in my work clothes." Ibrahim glanced at Musa, who immediately understood the unspoken command. "Madame, we will stop at your home so you can change before going to the palace." The presidential motorcade created quite a spectacle in Mariam's humble neighborhood of Depoya. Children playing soccer in the dusty street froze mid-game as the sleek vehicles with government plates pulled up outside the small apartment building where Mariam had lived for the past decade. Neighbors peered from doorways and windows as security personnel established a perimeter, and Mariam, still in her work uniform, emerged from the president's car. She waved at gaping neighbors with a mix of embarrassment and pride. "I'll wait," Ibrahim said, remaining in the vehicle while Mariam went to change. Inside her one-room apartment, Mariam moved frantically, pulling out her finest boo-boo, a vibrant, blue and gold outfit she wore only for weddings and religious celebrations. As she changed, she glanced around at her simple possessions. The small television her children had bought her for her 60th birthday, the prayer mat in the corner, photographs of grandchildren taped to the wall. What would Ibrahim think of how she lived? There was no shame in honest poverty, she reminded herself, but the contrast between her life and his current status was stark. When she emerged 30 minutes later, Ibrahim barely recognized the transformation. Gone was the hospital cleaner in her gray uniform. In her place stood a dignified Burkinabe matriarch, her head wrapped in a matching blue scarf, gold earrings catching the late afternoon sunlight. As the motorcade journeyed toward the presidential palace, Ibrahim noticed Mariam's hands fidgeting nervously in her lap. "There's nothing to worry about," he assured her. "It's just a building." Mariam gave him a knowing look. "It is not the building that concerns me, Ibrahim. It is your world. Government ministers, foreign diplomats. What will they think when you bring in a cleaning woman who speaks no French? Ibrahim took her weathered hand in his. They will see the woman who taught me that true leadership begins with service to others. The woman who worked 3 jobs so I could stay in school. The woman who showed me that dignity doesn't come from position or power. Mariam squeezed his hand but remained unconvinced. The presidential palace, originally built during colonial times and renovated several times since, impressed even in its restraint, more functional than opulent, reflecting the practical needs of governing a country with limited resources. Nevertheless, to Mariam, the manicured grounds and uniformed guards represented a world far removed from her daily existence. As they entered the formal reception area, staff members lined up to greet the president, their curious eyes taking in the elderly woman at his side. Ibrahim introduced Mariam as my mother without further explanation, watching as confusion, then understanding dawned on their faces. The palace chef had prepared traditional Burkinabe dishes upon Ibrahim's request, to, with baobab leaf sauce, grilled guinea fowl, and fresh fruits. They dined in a smaller, more intimate room rather than the formal state dining hall. As the meal progressed, Mariam gradually relaxed, even sharing stories of Ibrahim's childhood mischief with Musa, who remained in attendance. Ibrahim watched, her animation with delight, seeing glimpses of the younger woman who had shaped his formative years. "Do you remember the lessons you taught me about the crocodiles of Sabu?" Ibrahim asked as they enjoyed dessert. Mariam's eyes crinkled with pleasure. "The sacred crocodiles. Yes, I took all my children there to learn from them. I've never understood what was so important about those creatures," Musa admitted. Mariam set down her spoon. "The people of Sabu have lived alongside those crocodiles for generations without fear. The crocodiles could easily kill, yet they don't. The people could easily hunt them, yet they don't. Instead, they have found a way to coexist with mutual respect." She looked pointedly at Ibrahim. "I told my children that leadership is like this, powerful enough to destroy, wise enough not to, strong enough to command, but choosing instead to cooperate. This is the Burkinabe way." Ibrahim nodded, remembering those lessons. "I think of those crocodiles often in meetings with foreign diplomats." As the evening drew to a close, Ibrahim could see Mariam growing tired. Despite his offer of palace accommodation, she insisted on returning to her apartment. "I have work tomorrow," she said simply. "The hospital floors won't clean themselves." As the presidential vehicle delivered her home, Ibrahim made a decision. The worlds that had collided today would need to find their own balance, just like the people and crocodiles of Sabu. By the following morning, news of President Traoré's reunion with his adoptive mother had spread throughout Ouagadougou and beyond. The state media had released a carefully worded statement confirming that the president had reconnected with Mariam Ouedraogo, a woman who had cared for him during his childhood after his biological mother's illness. Ibrahim sat in his office, scanning the newspaper headlines and social media commentary. The public reaction fascinated him. Some outlets portrayed it as a touching human interest story, while others analyzed the political implications of a head of state openly embracing his humble origins. The French newspapers are particularly interested, Musa reported, setting down a folder of international press clippings. They're calling it a powerful symbol of Burkina Faso's complex social structures and a rebuke to political elitism. Ibrahim set the papers aside. "And what are our people saying?" "It's overwhelmingly positive, sir. People are sharing stories of their own adoptive parents and traditional child-rearing practices. Some are suggesting that Madame Ouedraogo represents the mother of the nation." Ibrahim nodded thoughtfully. The personal had become political, as it often did for those in power, but his concern was more immediate. "Has anyone bothered Mama Mariam at her home or workplace?" "We stationed plainclothes security near her apartment and the hospital," Musa assured him. "So far, only a few journalists have attempted to approach her. She refused to speak with them and went about her workday as usual." That sounded like her, steadfast, unimpressed by attention. Ibrahim smiled at the thought of journalists being dismissed by the diminutive cleaning woman as she focused on her tasks. Later that morning, During a scheduled meeting with his cabinet ministers, Ibrahim noticed subtle changes in their demeanor. Some seemed more deferential than usual, others more relaxed. Minister Somé, who had always been somewhat aloof, approached Ibrahim after the meeting. "My mother was a market woman in Bobo Dioulasso," Somé confided quietly. "She sold vegetables until she was 73. I paid for her home, but she insisted on working, said it gave her purpose." Ibrahim recognized the offering for what it was, a bridge between them, acknowledging their shared understanding of Burkina Faso's resilient people. Similar moments occurred throughout the day as officials and staff found ways to express solidarity with the president's connection to ordinary citizens. By afternoon, Ibrahim had made a decision. He summoned Bamouni to discuss his idea. "I want to establish a new national initiative," he explained. "A program to recognize and support the informal adoptions and family care networks that have always been part of our society." Bamouni, ever practical, raised an eyebrow. "What specifically are you proposing, Mr. President?" "Financial support for families caring for children who are not biologically theirs. Educational stipends for those children. Recognition of traditional caregiving arrangements in official documentation." Ibrahim leaned forward. "Our strength has always been in these community bonds, not in government institutions." "The budget implications," Bamouni began. "Will be managed," Ibrahim cut in. "This is not negotiable. Draft a proposal by next week." Later that evening, Ibrahim visited Mariam's apartment without prior announcement, bringing with him only a small security detail and no government vehicles to attract attention. He found her preparing dinner, the small television in the corner broadcasting the evening news. "You've caused quite a stir," she said by way of greeting, gesturing to the screen where a photograph of them at the hospital was being shown. Ibrahim smiled apologetically. "Fame is an unavoidable side effect of my position. I hope it hasn't disturbed your life too much." "Pah." Mariam waved dismissively. "Some neighbors bring food now, thinking I'll mention them to you. The hospital director offered me a better position this morning." "And did you accept?" "I told him I've been cleaning floors for 30 years and I'm too old to learn a new job." She stirred the pot on her small stove. "Besides, cleaning is honest work. Someone must do it." Ibrahim settled into her only chair while she continued. "Cooking. I'm establishing a program to support traditional adoption practices. People like you who take in children without formal procedures." Mariam nodded approvingly. "Good. Many children need homes, and many families have love to give. The government should recognize what has always happened in our communities." They ate together simply, Mariam serving him rice and sauce on one of her 2 plates. Ibrahim ate with his fingers as he had done as a child, the familiar taste of her cooking bringing back memories stronger than any state dinner could evoke. After the meal, Ibrahim shared his broader vision for improving healthcare access in rural areas, remembering how Mariam had struggled to get treatment for his adoptive father years ago. She listened intently, occasionally offering practical insights that could only come from someone who had navigated these systems from the bottom. "You should have advisors who have used the hospital as patients, not just doctors and administrators," she commented. "Would you be one of them?" Ibrahim asked half-jokingly. To his surprise, Mariam considered the question seriously. "Not me. But I know who your government should speak with." She named several community health workers and midwives from her neighborhood. "These people understand what families face." Ibrahim made mental notes. His ministers and advisors brought expertise and education, but Mariam brought wisdom born of experience, a different but equally valuable perspective. As he prepared to leave, Ibrahim noticed a small photo frame on Mariam's side table. It contained a faded picture of a much younger Mariam surrounded by 5 children of various ages. He recognized himself as a solemn-faced boy of perhaps 7, standing slightly apart from the others. "You were always different," Mariam said, following his gaze. "Quieter, watching everything. I knew you would either become something special or find trouble, sometimes both." Ibrahim carefully placed the photo back. "You gave me a foundation when I had none." Whatever I've become began with you. Outside, as the security team escorted him to the waiting car, Ibrahim looked back at the modest apartment building. In a country where family connections had always mattered more than formal institutions, his reconnection with Mariam represented something profound, not just personally, but for the nation he now led. The ripples from their reunion were only beginning to spread. 3 months after the hospital encounter, Ibrahim stood at a podium in the Grand Hall of Ouagadougou's Convention Center. Before him sat an audience that reflected Burkina Faso's diverse society, government officials in Western suits alongside community leaders in traditional dress, international development partners beside local activists. Today, Ibrahim announced, I am proud to sign into law the Family Care Recognition Act, acknowledging the traditional care networks that have always formed the backbone of our society. He gestured to the front row where Mariam sat, dressed in an elegant hand-woven cotton outfit, her head held high despite her obvious discomfort with the attention. This legislation was inspired by my own experience and by the countless similar stories across our nation. Children raised by aunts, uncles, neighbors, or community members when biological parents cannot provide care. These arrangements, once invisible to the state, will now receive official recognition and support. As applause filled the hall, Ibrahim reflected on the journey of the past 3 months. What had begun as a personal reunion had evolved into a national conversation about family, community responsibility, and the intersection of traditional practices with modern governance. The law he was signing established financial stipends for caregivers, educational support for children in informal adoption arrangements, and legal recognition of these relationships for health care and inheritance purposes. More importantly, it acknowledged that Burkina Faso's strength lay in these community bonds that had sustained its people through colonialism, drought, economic hardship, and political instability. After the ceremony, a small private reception allowed Ibrahim to introduce Mariam to several key ministers and international partners. She had initially resisted attending, but Ibrahim had convinced her of the importance of her presence. You represent thousands of women and men who have raised children not their own, he had told her. Your face gives them visibility. Now, watching her speak confidently with the Minister of Family Affairs about the realities faced by caregiving families in poor neighborhoods, Ibrahim felt a surge of pride. Mariam had adapted to her new role with the same quiet dignity she brought to everything. Much had changed in her life. Although she had stubbornly refused to stop working entirely, she had accepted a position as a community liaison at the hospital, where her knowledge of neighborhood needs and patient concerns proved invaluable. She had also agreed to move to a larger apartment in the same neighborhood, one with reliable electricity and running water, though she insisted on paying a portion of the rent herself. Independence is precious at my age, she had explained. Most significantly, Mariam had become an unofficial advisor to Ibrahim, meeting with him weekly to provide perspectives from ordinary citizens. These meetings remained private, away from media attention, allowing for honest conversations about the impact of government policies on daily life. As the reception concluded, Ibrahim's security detail cleared a path for him and Mariam to exit, through a side entrance where vehicles waited. Will you join me at the palace for dinner? He asked her. Mariam shook her head. Not tonight. I promised to visit Aisha and the grandchildren. She patted his arm. You should come. They are your family too, Ibrahim hesitated. His relationship with Mariam's biological children and grandchildren was still developing. Some had welcomed him warmly, while others remained cautious, unsure of his intentions or uncomfortable with the sudden connection to power. Next time, he promised. Give them my regards. As they parted ways, Ibrahim watched Mariam's vehicle leave before entering his own. His thoughts drifted to the changes in his own life since their reunion. He had always governed with a sense of responsibility toward his people, but reconnecting with Mariam had humanized his approach. Cabinet meetings now often included discussions of how policies would affect ordinary families. He had initiated regular forums where citizens could speak directly with government officials about their concerns. Most recently, He had begun visiting homes in different neighborhoods, sometimes announced, sometimes not, to see firsthand how people lived. His political advisors had initially been skeptical of these populist gestures, as they called them, but the public response had been overwhelming. In a region where leaders often became disconnected from their constituents, Ibrahim's authentic engagement resonated with people's desire for governance that understood their daily struggles. That evening, alone in his office at the presidential palace, Ibrahim reviewed the day's events. On his desk sat a framed photograph, not an official portrait or diplomatic meeting, but a simple image of himself and Mariam taken at her apartment, both smiling easily at the camera. Beside it lay a hand-carved wooden crocodile, a gift from Mariam after their dinner at the palace, reminding him of those childhood lessons about power and coexistence. His phone buzzed with a message from Mariam. Aisha's youngest boy won his school competition today. He wants to be president someday. I told him he should aim higher, to be a good man first, like his uncle. Ibrahim smiled at the gentle correction implicit in her words. For all his accomplishments and position, Mariam would always see him first as the boy she had raised, holding him to the values she had instilled. And in that lay a profound truth about leadership. His legitimacy as president came from constitutional procedures and political processes, but his understanding of what his people needed came from his own journey, from the boy raised by a cleaning woman to the man who now led a nation. In reuniting with Mariam, Ibrahim had reconnected not just with his personal past but with the authentic spirit of Burkina Faso itself, resilient, communal, pragmatic, and deeply humane. In honoring her role in his life, he honored the countless unnamed others who sustained the nation's social fabric through their daily acts of care and sacrifice. As the lights of Ouagadougou twinkled beyond his window, Ibrahim Traoré, orphan, soldier, president, son, understood that his greatest strength as a leader came not from the power of his office, but from the wisdom of remembering where he came from and who had helped him along the way. In a world that often separated people by class, education, and status, his journey with Mariam had created a bridge, not just between them but between the presidential palace and the hospital corridors where ordinary citizens worked, struggled, and hoped for a better tomorrow. That understanding would guide him forward, informing each decision, each policy, each interaction. And in that, perhaps, lay his most important contribution to his beloved Burkina Faso.